Somewhere on the outskirts of Millsburg, in a military base, several thousand soldiers stood neatly at attention. From generals to privates, everyone stood with their backs straight. They all stood in well-arranged rows, and it was a grand sight to behold. Other than the usual troops, prominent figures from both the military and political fields were there. They all stood there in anticipation, a little nervous. "General Winslow, will the Scarlet Warrior really be here today?" Dillon, who stood near the front, whispered to General Winslow, who stood in front of him. He had suddenly received notice from the army that the goddess of war, Scarlet Spanner, would be visiting Millsburg. As a high-ranking commander of the Dark Panther Cavalry and a direct subordinate of Scarlet Spanner, he rushed over immediately. "Of course, don't you see that both of her trusted aides are here?" General Winslow gestured for Dillon to look in front of them. Dillon looked over, and just as General Winslow said, there were two graceful and stunning female generals standing at attention right in the front row. They were both major generals of the Dark Panther Cavalry and considered third-ranking officials. They stood out in stark contrast to all the other high-ranking officials around them just because they were Scarlet Spanner's trusted confidants. Because of that, they held a higher status than those around them, so much so that even the second-ranking officials had to show them a certain level of respect. As though noticing something amiss, one of the major generals turned around and met Dillon's gaze with her own cold and stern gaze. Startled, Dillon lowered his head guiltily, not daring to meet her gaze. When facing such a person of authority, his arrogance disappeared, and there was only fear. It was true that he looked down on others. Regardless of their gender, the generals of the Dark Panther Cavalry were all elites, whom he was in no position to look down on. Just then, a whirring sound came from above. Everyone lifted their heads and looked up, only to see a military chopper quickly making its way toward them. The wind from the whirring blades hit them all. "She's here." Dillon's expression turned serious as he straightened up, puffing his chest out. When the chopper reached the military base, it hovered overhead for quite some time, not making its descent. "What's the matter?" Just as everyone began to wonder, the helicopter's door opened up, and a figure fully clad in red stuck its head through the door, looking around inquisitively. Then, amidst the troops' stares of horror and bewilderment, the figure leaped out the door, jumping down from over 300 feet in the air. With a loud thud, the red figure landed heavily on the ground, appearing like a deity that had descended from the sky. For a moment, the ground shook, sending billows of dust into the air. What just played out shocked the crowd silly as they all gaped in amazement. How could someone survive jumping at such a height? As the smoke and dust cleared, they noticed a huge crater, and right in the middle of it stood an elegant figure in red. It was a lady dressed in a red tracksuit who had a long sword in one hand. She had her silver hair cropped short and had looks that were to die for. She could captivate someone with just a single glance. However, unlike the usual gentleness of women, there was a deep set of strength etched in her brows, exuding grace and grandeur. Her eyes, especially, were aloof and indifferent, seeming to see through everything. She seemed uninterested in everyone. Just one look from her was enough to make one feel inferior and ashamed of themselves. The lady was none other than Scarlet Spanner, one of the two well-known aces of the Spanner family and the best goddess of war Dragonmarsh ever had. As expected of the one and only goddess of war. "It's truly amazing how she made her appearance," Dillon exclaimed inwardly, marveling at her. She had just jumped from a height of over 300 feet and appeared to be perfectly fine. That was no feat that an ordinary human could accomplish. Though he was from the Dark Panther Cavalry, he had only ever seen her heroic moves from afar. To be able to see her pull such a dangerous stunt up front and near truly left him shell-shocked. "Welcome, General." Her two trusted aides bowed and greeted her first. "Welcome, General." The rest of the troops followed after them, bowed, and greeted her. Their voices reverberated throughout the entire military base. Scarlet gave them a sweeping glance. It was nothing more than a simple act, but everyone felt an inexplicable pressure just from her gaze, making it difficult for them to even breathe. It wasn't until Scarlet looked away that the pressure gradually disappeared. She walked up to her two confidants and asked casually, "Do you have any information on the person I was looking for?" The two major generals were named Georgia and Bridget, respectively. We've searched the entire Millsburg for someone with the same name, but none of them was the person you wanted. We suspect that the person isn't here, Georgia said with her head bowed. That's impossible, Scarlett said. Adam would never have the guts to lie to me. He must be here but under a different name. Keep searching. Yes, Georgia answered and quickly left with her men. I plan to stay here for an extended period. Get me a place to stay, Scarlett ordered. I've already arranged for that, General. It's at Forlonge Estate, Bridget reported. Lead the way. Scarlett wasted no time on small talk. Yes. Bridget nodded and drove off with Scarlett, leaving the rest of the troops in their dust. Who exactly is the goddess of war here for, General Winslow? She seems so anxious to find that person. Dylan could no longer hold in his curiosity when he saw the car leave. How would I know? General Winslow rolled his eyes. Who dares meddle in her personal affairs? You've got a point there. Dylan chuckled awkwardly. Scarlett was an intimidating figure in the army, so nobody dared speak freely about her. I'm not sure who she's after, but I'm certain that it's a man, General Winslow said thoughtfully. A man? Dylan's eyes widened. No way. What kind of man can make the goddess of war place such importance on him? Scarlett was such a skilled martial artist, second to none, and was an amazing woman who trumped every woman in Dragonmarsh. If word were to get out that she had traveled such a distance to Millsburg just for a man, it would create a significant commotion among the public. At the thought of that, Dylan could not help but feel slightly jealous. Scarlett was a gorgeous fighter who was beyond everyone's reach. To be able to get Scarlett's attention was something worth boasting about. Dylan wondered who the lucky bastard who caught her eye was. Over in the moving car, Scarlett carefully pulled out a well-kept photograph. In it were a teenage boy and girl, at the peak of their youth. The young girl leaned on the boy's shoulder, a hint of a smile replacing her usual aloof expression. Looking at the pair of youths in the photo, a look of melancholy came over Scarlett, as though she was reminiscing about the past. After gazing at the photograph for a moment, she pressed it to her chest and sighed. Where are you, Logan? I've been searching for you for the past 10 years.